we record this session. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce your moderator for the day, one of our very beloved farm board members, singer-songwriter, concert presenter, knitter. She does many, many, many things. And please welcome Brianna Lane.
Hey y'all, I'm Brianna. Thanks, Annie. Excuse me. I'm so excited for this panel today, and it has been a long time in the making because we were trying to find the right folks to speak to you about accessibility issues and what is disability, all of that. Charlie Mosbrook is here. He is on our board of directors and always very willing to talk about his accessibility issues and how and he usually runs panels at the farm conference about that. And then Amy Dixon-Kolar, I met through a farm event, I believe, and just grabbed onto her because she is a ASL interpreter, and I would love to learn ASL. I actually am learning ASL. So every day, just a little bit every day. So I'm going to let them really introduce themselves and give them their few minutes of fame. I also would like to share a little bit more about myself, even though I'm not a panelist. This is a topic that is near and dear to me because I started a venue and didn't think enough about this stuff. And then I got into a lot of community conversations. Our venue was not wheelchair accessible. And I immediately felt like, oh, what did we do? But now we have such an opportunity we have abandoned our old location that is not accessible, and we have a new opportunity to do better. I also have a chronic invisible illness. So I do need accessibility in my life sometimes too, even though I don't necessarily look like it. And I am always willing to talk to folks about that. But I'm going to let these two do most of the talking, especially at the beginning of the hour here, and then open it up to questions. I'm so glad you all are here. I wish there were 50 people here, but what we can do after this is share this, because we will archive this video, and that'll be on our website, farmvirtualconnections.org. And what we can do is just share this widely until this becomes more common to attend, right? So here we are. I will who wants to go first, Amy or Charlie? We did not talk about that. Amy or Charlie?
Actually, I said, go ahead, Charlie.
Okay, go ahead, Charlie. I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if that was, I'll go.
I'm gonna mute myself here.
Yeah, right.
All right, Charlie.
Nothing will work correctly without my mute on. Well, my name is Charlie Mosbrook. I am on the board of Folk Alliance Region Midwest Farm, and I am on the Virtual Connections Committee. I have lived for the past 10 years with a spinal cord injury around the C5, C6, C7 area of that's back here if you're unfamiliar with that anatomy. I have very limited mobility in my lower region, and I spend quite a bit of time in a wheelchair. I would not say I'm confined to a wheelchair because I am able to get up with a cane and move short distances. Actually, I would say nobody's confined to a wheelchair because I also sleep in a bed, which is important to remember. Confinement is a funny word. I serve in Cleveland Heights on the Transportation Advisory Committee. That's the city I live in, and I serve for people with accessibility needs throughout our community. Brianna was saying during her introduction that she, from time to time, has accessibility issues. And I want to remind everybody that we all have accessibility issues from time to time. My dad was a journalist for close to, I think, 45 years. He always had an earpiece in his ear. Now he always has an earpiece in his ear. He didn't see it coming. he's lived a nice long life, and he now is really struggling through the COVID situation because he can't read lips, and his hearing aids aren't, they get tangled up in his mask. It's a real complication. And for all of us, if we live long enough, we're going to have accessibility needs. And so it's important to remember for venues, for anything that we're doing online, that these are things we need to address. I also run a small arts organization in Cleveland Heights, in Cleveland, Ohio, and we do concerts. And one of our first issues is always to remember those needs, because most of our audience, any of our audience that needs it, we want to accommodate them. And I do recognize, that we all have different struggles. I see concert presenters, say in Metamora, trying to make those needs, doing all they can to, and I applaud everybody for every attempt we can do to make our concerts more accessible to everybody. And these days we're trying to make our online needs. One thing I love about the online community is you can't really tell I have a spinal cord injury here. That's one cool thing about doing concerts virtually. Anyway, I'm going to pass it along to Amy because she's next.
I'd like to just comment real quick about one thing that you said. You said venues are doing things here and there, and I think that it is. I would like to emphasize that it's about a lot of people doing little things imperfectly, and be willing to learn more than having just a few people doing things perfectly. And I want to keep that in mind as we roll forward in this conversation. When we open it up to questions, that all the questions are welcome. And every time we add something to what we're doing as a performer or a venue, or a lover of music, a concert goer, everything that we're doing to have actionable steps towards more accessibility is positive work. So with that spirit in mind, let's go forward to Amy.
Okay. Hi, I'm Amy Dixon-Kolar. I am a singer-songwriter. I'm a solo performer. I'm part of a trio called Song Sisters with Sue Fink and Patty Schaffner. But I'm also a almost lifelong interpreter. So I'm an American Sign Language English interpreter. I've been doing that for 40 years. I started when I was 2. And I also am hard of hearing. And so I'm a hard of hearing performer. I've been an educator. I've taught interpreting. I've taught workshops. I've done a lot related to accessibility. And so obviously my focus is the deaf and hard of hearing community. And the one thing I'll just say right off the bat is, if the phraseology deaf and hard of hearing community could become a part of how you say things instead of hearing impaired, that would be very welcome by members of the deaf and hard of hearing community, because hearing impaired implies impairment, where most deaf and hard of hearing people don't feel like they're impaired at all. All right, so that's just my little spiel to start things off.
All right, we are going to touch upon today how we're dealing with things right now on Zoom and in the crazy landscape that is the music world right now, as presenters and performers, what we can be doing now, and also what we can be doing when we're reopening and in person. And I know that Amy has prepared a lot of fantastic information for you, and I may just let her roll with that. I would like to note that the one thing that we are really missing from this panel that we tried hard to get is someone who could speak to issues with sight. And so even though we don't have that on this panel, if you feel like you can talk to that, that is great. And we would love to hear from you later on in the conversation. And also we are happy to provide any resources after the fact as well. So let's go back to you, Amy, and I would love to learn more about I think what you said in our pre-meeting was a semester's worth of information in 15 minutes.
Right.
So I would love to get a fast and furious education from you.
Great. And just so you know, I have been an educator for a really long time, and so I have a PowerPoint that I'll share with you, and that will also be made available after the fact, right, Annie? That this will be available? Okay. Okay, so here we go. Now, with the gallery view, you might not be able to see everything's on the screen, but most of it you should be able to see. Now, the one thing I didn't spend a lot of time on was related to Zoom, partly because we're doing part of that, which is captioning, and having captioning available, either closed captioning that people can turn on or open captioned that everyone could see. And because honestly, people who have become hard of hearing really depend on the captioning. And as a hard of hearing person, and I'm not very hard of hearing, but I do wear hearing aids, I depend on the captioning a lot. And so having that available just in general is a great thing. Yes, deaf and hard of hearing people do love music. And so you don't have to think, oh, well, you know, we do music, so we don't have to worry about deaf and hard of hearing people, because really that's not true. Okay, what I'm going to be doing here is throwing a whole lot of information at you, but know that at the end I have a list of resources that relate to everything I'm talking about. Last week there was a wonderful, wonderful presentation by FAI and NAPAMA that related to accessibility. And one of the people on that panel is Dr. Tina Childress, and she's someone I've worked with for probably 10, 15 years off and on, and she is a late deafened adult who's also an audiologist. So she has let me borrow and share some of the information on her website, so that's in the resources as well. All right, so regarding venues, with accessibility in general, not just for deaf and hard of hearing people, but in general, it might be a good idea for venues to start to think about what is your mission, what is your goal regarding accessibility? What are you prepared to do regarding accessibility, and what might limit your venue regarding accessibility? Brianna, you talked about the fact that it wasn't wheelchair accessible. So what do you do about that? You know, and I think that having a conversation about that is a really good idea, even if you're a well-established venue or if you're just starting one. The other thing that I always suggest to venues, to festivals, is to plan accessibility into your budget ahead of time. Don't think, oh my gosh, last minute, somebody asked for an interpreter and we don't have any money. Somebody asked for a captioner, we don't have any money. Plan those things into your budget, because the more you plan them into your budget, the more you'll think about them in advance instead of thinking about it at the last minute. A wonderful quote that I read, and I gave you the article at the end in the resources, is one of the most important steps towards ensuring your venue is as accessible as possible is ensuring your staff and volunteers are educated, informed, and knowledgeable on the topic. Because you could do everything that you want to do related to accessibility, but if the people who are working with you or for you don't get it, then you're not going to be making people with disabilities as welcome as they could be. And so let's talk about how you can welcome people with disabilities into your venue. Now, of course, I'm talking about deaf and hard of hearing patrons. And again, deaf and hard of hearing versus hearing impaired is a really important thing to remember. We are in the folk community, I don't like to say we're all getting older, but our population, if you look at your audiences, there will be a number of people in the audience with gray hair, and people who have been involved involved with the folk community for many, many years. And as Charlie mentioned about his dad, people are getting older and people are starting to wear hearing aids. People are starting to need more accessibility just by the very fact that they're getting older. And that doesn't even include people who are deaf and hard of hearing who are younger who want to be involved in the music scene. Just a really quick note about hearing aids. They are not like glasses. You can't put a hearing aid on and then you hear perfectly. They're very, they do, they work very differently. What they do is they amplify frequencies that a person with a hearing loss might not hear well. They don't amplify speech per se. If a person doesn't understand speech without a hearing aid, depending on their hearing loss, they might not understand speech with a hearing aid. All right, it works to bring up the volume of the frequencies. It'll bring those up. But in doing that, it might actually compress sounds so that people who are wearing hearing aids, especially if at the higher frequency, and they wear a hearing aid, it compresses the high frequencies down to a different frequency. And so you might have people with hearing aids who are saying, no, the sound is off. That sounds flat. That doesn't sound right. It's because they're actually hearing it at a different frequency. I used to learn to play the fiddle, and I couldn't understand why I couldn't make it sound right because I was always sounding flat. And it was because what I was hearing was flat, not because I was playing it incorrectly. That might have been the problem too. But the fact is that I couldn't hear the fiddle frequency at the frequency it was supposed to be at because my hearing aids was bringing it down. So that's something to think about as far as your patrons are concerned if they complain about sound. It might be their hearing aids and not your sound. If you're going to be doing flyers or for your web page, if you're going to be offering accessibility, these are some symbols that you might want to be aware of. The first one is the CC is for closed captioning like we have today, so that someone would have to turn it on to be able to see the captioning. Open captioning is where everyone can see it. And then the third one means that you will be providing an American Sign Language English interpreter. Those what those mean. Also on your flyers and your web page, a good thing to be able to do for your deaf and hard of hearing patrons is to either have a QR reader or links to things like the performer's lyrics page, to links related to or QR readers related to some apps that I will talk about that might help a patron that they could download, like a voice to text app that they could have on their phone and they put it up, and so the lyrics might come through to their phone, or what someone is speaking would come through to their phone as a text, so that if they're not getting the words, they can get the words through text. And there are a number of apps that can do that. And then there are also captioning organizations or people who do CART, things like this, that can help as well. Just an FYI, if your web page has videos, caption them. Make them available, because that is a clear message to the deaf and hard of hearing community that you care about who they are, that you are welcoming them to your organization. And don't use YouTube auto caption, or you will get swearing. You will get something that is way off, and they'll be starting to talk about giraffes or something when you're talking about something else. So you want to definitely caption. And I did put something in the resources related to how to caption a YouTube video.
Amy, I was going to ask about automatic captioning because Instagram IGTV just came out with automatic captioning yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
which is fantastic in my mind. And then Zoom also has made an announcement that they are going to be offering automatic captioning, but I also hear a lot of complaints. Is it because of giraffes and swearing, or is it that inaccurate, or good if you don't have any other resources at the moment? Is it better than nothing, or is it kind of a
Well, sometimes I rather prefer nothing instead of something that is really off. And having been an interpreter in the school system, especially in colleges and graduate school, when an instructor puts on an captioning for an art program, let's say, and they start talking about bombing in Dresden, and the student is just totally confused, it makes a difference. It really does. But I think the technology has gotten better, but that's all I can say about that. Now, I really look for things that are captioned and open captioned, and I am working very hard to caption all of my videos for my music on YouTube. And it takes a while, but you
Yeah,
get the hang of it.
thank you.
Um, okay, one thing to put on your flyer, I just want to make sure that Charlie has time. I'm going to go through this real quick if I don't get to it all. Um, re- Ask patrons to request accessibility ahead of time. Don't Most people who need accessibility will to call in advance, but you might want to put that on your flyer, especially if it relates to an interpreter or a captioner, because you need time to do that. And so putting that on your website, putting that on a flyer. I'm going to skip the loops and Bluetooth accessibility. Hearing aids, many of them now have Bluetooth, and so they might be able to tap into your sound system, and that's something you might want to check out. Of course, prioritize seating. I talked about voice-to-text apps. Maybe if you have a QR available that patrons could download, and I put a few in the resources, some for Android, some for OS, that people could download to be able to, again, get text if they can't understand the words. Or if you want to do that on a monitor, if you can't get a captioner, I don't know if Joe would agree with me with this, but sometimes if you don't have a captioner, you might be able to do um, the, the speech to text on a monitor. And then also providing lyrics. Providing lyrics is a big deal. And if you can do that, or if the performer can do that, it's great. Okay, regarding interpreters, please do not ask for volunteers. Think of yourself as a musician and how many times you have been asked to volunteer your services for this, that, and the other thing, and it's good exposure, and why would you want to, this is what you do and you love it, so why wouldn't you volunteer? Interpreters and captioners, they're professionals, they're nationally certified, they're licensed by the state, they have to pay for all these certifications and licenses yearly, and it's our living. It's what we do for a living. Now, people do things pro bono, but it's the living. So also, if performers can give interpreters and captioners lyrics ahead of time, really, really helpful. Because if not, and we can't hear you, we might be making up words that you're not singing, which I've done. Uh, decide where the captioning monitor is going to be. Decide on your placement of the interpreter in advance. Make sure you don't put the interpreter in front of a speaker, because then they're not going to actually be able to hear what's going on. Give them a dedicated monitor if possible, dedicated lighting if possible, if needed. Um, okay, I have to talk about this real quick, and I will make it quick. Many performers in our field are also losing their hearing, and many don't want to admit it. But the fact is that that's happening, and so I'm just going to say hearing aids really help. I put in some resources for financial aid related to hearing aids because they are expensive, but they can make a huge difference to your life and your performance. You can get programmable hearing aids that will put less compression on a music program. You have to work with an audiologist, but I have one of my programs that I could have just for music. Conversely, a dedicated monitor or an in-ear monitor, ask for a sound check to be what you need it to be as a performer. Don't just say, oh yeah, that's fine, because it might not be. And each individual is going to be different on what they need for themselves for hearing. I have to, when I sing, I have one hearing aid in, I have one hearing aid out so I can hear other people, and I have a dedicated monitor. And that way I can make sure that I'm hearing myself singing and hearing my guitar at the same time and hearing other people singing. So each individual is going to have to come up with their own way to handle it. And also, please, everybody, caption your videos. Fans really appreciate it. And that's what I got. And sorry if I took too long, but these are all the resources, and this is just scratching the surface. And this will be made available to you. All right.
This is wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I would like to give Charlie a chance to talk about wheelchair access in particular, and then open it up to questions for both of these two folks, and any experiences, anything else that you would like to add. So it's not just questions, it's shared experiences as well. So yeah, Charlie, will you talk on wheelchair access, please?
I will. First, I want to mention something that's important for us all to remember about accessibility issues. All disabilities are on a spectrum. With people with spinal cord injuries, you could have a complete spinal cord in the cervical region, which renders most of the body pretty much immobile. Very limited use of hands, limited use of, you can't cough. And then there's very mild, where it's just an incomplete injury. It's a subtle injury, and it still affects maybe basic hand coordination or somebody's ability to walk properly. But it's a wide spectrum, just as in hearing and sight and autism, whatever might be your particular issue. There's a wide spectrum. And with that in mind, it's really important to remember to ask people their needs, because we all have different needs. I've found, especially during this COVID time, people wanting to help me and me wanting to maintain 6 feet. I'm a very, very independent person. I travel the country by myself in the wheelchair with a small sound system and a guitar and blah, blah, blah. I can mostly take care of myself. So it's important to ask people, because we all have our limits. We all have our wants and needs. And so just to assume that somebody needs something, and then, when somebody grabs you, especially right now, it's very uncomfortable. So please ask people before you go ahead and try to assist them, because they might not need that assistance. And some people might even consider it an assault. I know on the street I have, when I don't see people coming, they sneak up behind me and they just start pushing. It's like, that's not okay. So do ask. And with that in mind, if you are operating a venue, it's really important to get a feel, like Amy said, get a feel ahead of time of some of the needs your patrons are going to have. But do ask. I remember going to the Woody Guthrie Folk Festival 2 years ago, and I was a performer, and I showed up, and the stage manager looked at me and he said, "Wow, didn't even think about it." And all of a sudden he started building a checklist, and he just wanted to know everything that they could do. So doing what I do for the city, which is to wander around the city of Cleveland Heights and look for trouble, look for problems, see if I can't do it, probably nobody can, because I will figure out a way for the most part. So I look for problems. And so with that mindset, I was helping the guy at the Woody Guthrie Folk Festival to make a checklist of ways that they could improve their staging area and their grounds to make it more accessible for people in the future. And if you ever have those opportunities to have somebody really look at the area that you're trying to accommodate. And, I mentioned Metamora before. There's one cool thing about folk venues is that we, I think about On the Tracks, where Annie Capps has her and in Metamora at the barn there, and down here in Cleveland, we've got a place called the GAR Hall. They're just amazing buildings. They're cool. We want to show them off. We want to make them accessible. However, they're old buildings, so they need work. So they need questions, and in each of those situations, I think everybody's gone out of their way to make things more accessible to me and to try to improve things in the future. And I appreciate that because I don't want to play always in these buildings that were built for modern times. I like those old cool buildings, and at the same time, I want to be able to get in, and I want to know that some of my audience that appreciates my perspectives as a disabled person can get in too. So do ask, and always want to learn different ways to make your building more accessible. Um, I think that's the most important thing I can think of, just on a broad level. You know, it's really hard to dig in and just give you a surfacey. What you need to do is have handrails here and handrails there and blah blah blah. It's almost impossible. But to really understand that while there are guidelines that the government's put out and engineers and architects follow those guidelines, they're not always, they don't always address everything. We had an advantage as farm this year while we were searching for our next site for the conferences that have now been pushed back to, I think, 22 in the Chicago area. But while we were searching the site, I was on that committee and able to really look at every hotel. And you know, one of the big struggles I have pushing a wheelchair with my own power is carpeting. Deep carpeting hurts. At the end of a conference, I'm icing my shoulders. It's a problem. So I always look for that. And as we were trying to find our new accommodations for farm, that was something I was looking for, and different shower issues and all the different little things that people could find problems with. So if you ever have a chance, ask somebody to just go in and audit your location to try to make it a better location for everybody involved. I feel like I have one more thing to say, but I also feel like I'm running over. There was something really important I was thinking that needed to be said, and it'll come back to me, and I will say it.
One thing that I've been trying to go to more accessibility panels, and one thing I heard about wheelchairs in particular, and I think it was Galen Lee, was a lot of venues are making it really accessible for their patrons, and putting ramps in and working. I love what you said about the old buildings, because that was exactly our problem. We thought maybe we can put something in that'll work, but it's a really old building. And Galen said that often she can get in spaces, but then she can't get on stage. So making ramps up to the stage and making those more normal to see in situations. That's one thing that she said she would like to see. So we are going to make that happen.
I'm sure there are many grants available for organizations, and with ramps, you can usually get some sort of device that, you know, it's not a permanent ramp. It's not a permanent structure thing. The one thing about ramps, though, they do, you know, if it's pitched too steep, you know, I risk falling backwards if that ramp is too steep, or even not being able, you know, I may even slide down a ramp. There's a lot of, I remember taking a wheelchair down into a canyon in the redwoods, and the minute those wheels hit those needles, woo, I was not the only person using a wheelchair that day. It was an adventure.
You make it sound fun, but I bet it was scary as hell.
You know, it's a little bit of both.
Okay, cool.
That's life. Right. Scary and fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I just add something here real quick, Brianna? There's a phrase within the disability community that says, "Nothing about us without us." And I think that's a really important phrase, is that, as Char was saying, ask. Maybe invite people to be on your committee with different disabilities. Invite patrons in to have a discussion about how to make it better for all people with disabilities, because really, nothing about us without us makes sense, instead of doing for people, doing with.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Um, I I would like to something that hasn't been said yet, that that is the only accessibility issue that I can think of for myself, is that sometimes I need to sit and sometimes I need to stand. And sometimes I need to make sure that I'm sitting somewhere very comfortable, and I can get out of the chair easily. And sometimes I can't even, sit down. So a various amount, or a very variation of seating and standing arrangements at your venue is actually very helpful. I didn't think about that either. And then that is something really simple to add in spaces. Taking chairs away, putting big comfy chairs in their place, taking other chairs away and leaving them away. Very simple. Charlie, you were going to say something?
Yeah, on that same issue, and going back to asking, for myself, with paralysis, I have a weakened bladder. I don't want to be seated up front. I really don't want to be seated in the front row because I want to be able to disappear when I have to. So ask. Everybody's got different needs, but that's one thing that always strikes me as weird is when they put me in oh, we've got a great seat for you, and then I can't get out of that seat, and it's really without causing a problem. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm a back of the class kid.
Back of the class. Let's at this point, let's open it up to questions, because it is 1:45 Central, and we don't want to go too far past 2, but we are, if this conversation is rolling, we'll keep it rolling. Annie, I see your hand up.
I'm going to ask questions for a couple of people who posted them in the chat, if you don't mind. So the first one that came up, which I thought was great, because I have seen many a service dog, and this was, any thoughts or recommendations about accessibility for service dogs or hearing dogs? So I don't know who got that, but anybody?
Let them
Well,
in.
yeah, do it. I think the one thing that you might want to do is put up a sign that says service animals welcome here, but make sure people aren't bringing their service peacocks in and things like that, because people start having many different types of comfort animals. So they should be registered service dogs instead of just, you know, and then, but putting up a sign would help also with people who might have allergies to animals. And allergies is another big thing. If you have smells or people with allergies to perfumes, asking people to maybe not wear perfume to your venue, because that might I was in a theater one time and I have a strong issue with any type of smell like that with perfume. I get sick and I start to have an asthma attack. And I had to leave a theater and I was sitting in the very middle row next to a woman with really strong perfume. So I had to leave. And so it might just be something to be aware of, that that's a hidden disability as well. That might be something venues would want to think about.
And to add to that, my niece is she trains service animals. It's a very expensive process. A lot of work goes into it. These are really well trained animals. My brother went on Amazon and found a little, emotional support vest for his little dog. I don't want to share too much family history, but we're a family here. The two of them did not agree on the use of my brother's little vest for his little support animal. Don't abuse it. Like anything, people really need those animals, and they're well trained. There's an enormous cost into training those animals, and you dilute the meaning of it when you put a vest on an animal that's not
Right.
really meant for that. And it's people depend on these things.
Absolutely. I hope that answered that person's question. And maybe there's other resources that folks can share on that too. Annie.
Yeah, we've got another question, and actually, it's a question and a comment. So Marilyn Ray Byer, who, for those of you who don't know, took over for Rich Warren um, in his midnight special program. She's a wonderful folk DJ. She was with us for a little bit, but she had to leave, and we did not know this until I saw her registration today, that she's associated with visually affected patrons. I almost said impaired. Amy, thank you so much for stopping that. In any case, Marilyn had to leave, but she said that she would gladly address any questions people have about visually challenged folks, and that's probably wrong too. She said, compile and send them. So language is really important, people. But yeah, she said compile them and send them to her, and we would be glad to do that for you. So you can either email us or put them in the chat, and I'll collect them and send them off to her. Because Mark Smith was asking, do we have anything to address visually affected patrons? Then we have something from Marnie here, saying that she's doing a lot of work on chemical sensitivities in the contra dance. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They'll be sharing that with Far West. It's one of our sister regions. So we'll keep an eye out for all of that. So thanks, Marnie. It is a huge factor. I've seen that come up at a lot of our conferences. Yeah.
Can I ask a question of Marnie and maybe Amy as well? I also deal with smell sensitivities too and chemical sensitivities. And I, as a venue operator and as a performer, I don't know how to address it personally. Like when someone comes in with more of a visible or physical accessibility issue, I can say, how can I help you? And you know, the smell thing is really hard to address, and like going up to a patron and saying, I'm sorry, but can you leave because your perfume is crazy. It's like up to me to leave, or up to the person who is sensitive to it to leave, and that's just not fair. So do you have any advice to offer that type of accommodation? And I think Marnie, you're unmuted now if you would like to talk.
Sure, yeah, thank you. Unfortunately, I don't have really good advice about it, especially in the moment, because it's the sort of thing that has to be addressed before people arrive.
Mm-hmm.
Once someone shows up to a space reeking, there's not a whole lot you can do. And it's a really challenging thing to work on. One thing you can look at is choosing spaces where you can have control over not having fragrances in the spaces, like conference hotels spewing out signature scents into the common spaces is a huge, huge, huge problem. And, you know, talking to the manager about it, and the manager says it's coming from corporate and they have to do it, and things like that. And also, I just want to put out there that it's not as simple as please don't wear perfume. Things like dryer sheets, fabric softeners, laundry stuff is a huge factor. That goes even further back for people, like not just what did you put on right before you came out, but certainly looking at air fresheners and scents in spaces, and understanding that things linger and stick to surfaces can be really helpful if you have control over that in your space.
That's great. And
Can I add to that?
yeah.
When I host house concerts, I do make sure that everyone who is registered to come and is interested in coming, that I put out there that we do have patrons who are coming to the house who are chemically sensitive. So please do not wear blah, 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 or please no strong scents. And that's something I can do because it's a house concert.
Right.
But you could, again, you could put that in your flyer, you can put that on your website. You can, as you're becoming more welcoming to people with different disabilities, you can make that a part of your whole disability platform, you know? And the other thing I would strongly suggest is be very willing to help people change their seats, so that if someone is sitting next to someone who has a strong scent for perfume or whatever, um, talk with people and say, would you mind switching places? Because, you know, you don't even have to go into their disability, but be willing to change seats. And maybe not just the person who has a disability, but maybe the person who has the sense. You know, it doesn't have to be always the onus of the person with a disability to make the changes. So it's just something to consider. And I know that if if it hadn't been right in the middle of Act 2 in this play, or Act 1 in this play, I would have complained about this person and asked my seat to be changed. It's hard if it's sold out, but you know, there are ways to make accommodations like that.
Marnie, you have something more to say? Can you unmute yourself, or do I have to unmute you? Ask to unmute.
Yeah, I just.
Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, it's also very helpful to have someone available who's not impacted by sense, who can be a go-between, both because it's hard for a person who's being affected to approach someone and be close to them to talk about it, and it can be like have neurological effects and be very sort of panicking for someone. So it's hard for them to do it tactfully and skillfully sometimes.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. And one thing that we have talking about kind of panic inducing and just inducing stress or anxiety. It is anxiety producing sometimes for folks to ask to be their own advocate, period, no matter what kind of accessibility issue we're dealing with. So to be a person to ask, or if anyone needs anything, is a great step forward, and a great way to open the door to someone who might need some accommodations. Also, to put it in maybe your beginning announcements, if you are a performer or a venue operator. We always have an announcements before we start a show, and maybe to say, if anyone needs any accommodations that you're not receiving, you can let any of our staff know. I know that puts the onus back on the other person, but it does open that door a crack at least, and let them know that you're at least thinking about it. What do we have other questions, Annie? No other questions? Do we have questions that haven't been asked by any of the other folks that are here? No.
In our
Thumbs up right there. Jared, I'm not sure you have a question. I think you were just thumbs upping something we did earlier, but you just confirm that for me. I can't see you, but yeah, I don't see any more questions.
I was going to toss something in. This probably relates to where we're going to bridge to. This may be a transition, but on, you know, the personal hygiene, perfume and things like that. It's probably a very good idea also to be very careful of how you ask people, because as we're seeing with masks these days, asking people to be considerate of others is very difficult. For myself, living in a wheelchair, I am down below you. So when you don't have your nose covered, it's coming at me. How do I say that without getting shot or, you know, attacked? So we need to be very thoughtful in how how we ask people to do things these days, unfortunately, because as Fauci said, I don't know how to tell you to care about people. I think he said that.
Right.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Oh shoot, I forgot where I was gonna go. I'm enjoying listening that I'm forgetting that I'm moderating.
We were going to talk about the idea of opening back up and what that will mean.
Yeah, I think that we touched upon a lot of that in our presentations too. Opening back up. I think one thing that I would like to talk about for a little while is what can we keep from this time that is working for accessibility going forward in the music world. For instance, I love teaching online. I thought I would hate it, but I love it because I can wake up from a nap from my chronic fatigue and then and be in a lesson instead of having to travel to work and go and going and teaching a lesson. And I have a really crappy immune system. So not being 3 feet away from children, teaching them guitar is fantastic. So I'm going to keep that in my life. Let's more specifically speaking in the folk world with being singer-songwriters. You two are singer-songwriters and venue operators in this room. What can we learn from this time and bring it forward for folks? I'm really addressing that to Amy or Charlie right now. Others can join in if they'd like. And that you can raise your hand. I see Mark Smith is raising his hand. I don't know if that is in response to that thought in question, but
well, I think immediately the advent of the virtual concerts and the ability to meet virtually and live our lives in this manner, though it kind of sucks because I miss people. I also, it's very easy for me to get up on a Tuesday morning and meet with Schmitty and Annie and Brianna. I don't need to, just leaving my apartment is difficult. Everything needs to be considered, and that's pre and post COVID, and that's during COVID. It's work for me. Traveling the country is work for me, and knowing that I can play for people in Portland and Seattle right now, and in 3 years I can do that without having to jump. I'm going to still jump on the train once I can, but knowing that I can perform for people and that we've been in the sandbox learning how to do this well, I think is really going to be a benefit for not only the performers with accessibility issues, but for audiences that want to see live music and want to have that immediate connection with the artist. And I think that is a really good thing that's happening right now. I do worry, being somebody who relies on touching everything, and this is going to be true for blind people too, and we got to keep stuff clean. So if you have a venue and you're thinking about reopening sometime in late 21 or whenever we're allowed to start realistically thinking about that, I shouldn't say allowed, when we are able to realistically think about that, keeping things clean and safe for people who do need to hold on to handrails and touch braille and all these other things that are going to be important for them. It's going to be an important thing that we need to think about in the future.
Right. Can I just add something, Charlie, to what you said?
Mm-hmm.
The whole idea of virtual concerts, being able to carry that on, not only just because it's great for performers, but also there are a number of people with disabilities who don't leave their house and aren't able to go to venues. And so being able to present live concerts while you're having somebody perform, and you might have an audience, but also being able to live stream, and maybe they buy tickets or whatever, to make that available to people with disabilities who, for whatever reason, can't leave their house
Mm-hmm.
or can't get into the venue because it's not accessible. um, having that available to people would be such a boon. It would be such a boon and could bring so many more people in, especially if you advertised it that way. That we're here for the people who can come here, and we're here for the people who can't. And I think I was involved with the accessibility for the Women's March in 2017, and we had all the accessibility issues for on-site, but we also had an off-site people with disabilities march so that people could all come together on that one website and watch what was going on and share with each other because they couldn't be at the march, but they could share in the march. So that's just an idea.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. And Mark had a raised hand and Annie put it in the chat. Just wanted to make sure you all saw this, that Mark wants to share that live streaming all concerts would be something to continue. And that speaks to what Amy said too. Let's see. I would like to, oh, Annie has her hand raised. I would also like to kind of open up this discussion yes to questions if there's more questions, but also to experiences or ideas going forward. Annie, you first, however.
Yeah, all I was going to say is, as a concert host, first of all, I'm loving the captioning that's happening right now, and kind of kicking myself that we haven't done this sooner, but it is it's an investment. And I was thinking about the fact that my concerts are going to be hosted on Zoom for the foreseeable future, and having a captioner caption the songs, caption the lyrics would be pretty awesome. But can I afford to add that expense? Because they're rightfully paid probably should be paid a lot more than what they're getting paid. So to me, some of that, it does come back to, I think, what Amy said about having a budget. But I have to think about that part of it as well, because it's an offset of a cost now, so maybe that's where sponsorships and people who are generous in that department can help us out.
Yeah, there's an advertisement.
Super funny. Sorry, I'm gonna stop.
My thinking on that immediately is that is going to be where the merging of independent artists doing their solo shows and venues supporting them is going to make a big difference, that the venues will be able to help support, write grants, do things like that, that will make those accessibility issues more open. And that's where we really do need the venues to be a part of our lives. We're not.
I feel like he's staring right at me when he says.
I know. Good. Mark actually just chimed in and said grants for that right before Charlie said that. So I love it.
I think that there are a number of organizations that you can tap into that might be able to give grants for some things. And I don't think it's going to be giving out money hand over fist for interpreters and captioning and whatever for every venue and every show. But I think the other thing is if you tap into the communities themselves, if there are a number of deaf and hard of hearing patrons, let's say, who really want to come to your show, again, nothing about us without us, they might have grants, they might have ways to tap into money. And I know that I don't know about different states. In Illinois, we used to have a grant through the Department of Rehabilitation Services that would help pay for interpreting services for different things. I don't know, I don't think the grant is still working in Illinois because we're pretty strapped for money, but it's something to check into, that state organizations, disability organizations, places like the Lions Club and the Easter Seals and all of those organizations that give money might be ways to do it, especially if making accessibility a hallmark and a real important part of your venue, there might be people who would support you in that.
What's interesting is that we're talking so much about accessibility in one realm, in that we're making accommodations for folks with disabilities, but accessibility is also about money. Accessibility is, not everything is accessible to everyone because not everyone has the money to access it. So taking that time to find those resources is one. Have those conversations is two, and thinking about it in terms of equity instead of an accommodation that you're doing just for one or two people. This is making an even playing field for folks. This is worth it. And we could talk more about accessibility in terms of money another time. I do love the model of when Stage It came along, they have the model of hitching a ride. So if you can't afford to attend a Stage It concert, you can ask to hitch a ride and then someone can pay for your ticket. That's lovely. But yeah, there's plenty of resources and money out there to learn and gain more accessibility. I feel like we're rounding the corner to the end of our conversation because there's not a lot of questions happening, but I just want to check in with Annie real quick. Are there any other questions coming in? Does anybody want to share any of their experiences or thoughts or feelings on the matter right now? Any raised hands? I think we're rounding the bend then. I would like to know if Amy and Charlie have any last thoughts. And then I have a little closing thought for everyone to go away with. Amy, Charlie, last parting words?
To everybody, especially venue operators, thank you for making this a concern and being aware enough to just attend this meeting, FAI's meeting, or any other meetings where you can learn more about ways to make your concerts more accessible to everybody. So thank you for being here. I appreciate that.
And I was just going to say that you just have to keep the conversation going and keep talking about it, keep thinking about it, think outside the box, think of there's so many different ways that you can provide accommodation that might, as Brianna, you said, might not be perfect in the beginning, but it's better to do something imperfectly than not to do it, or to wait till you can do everything perfectly. I like that.
Excellent. I want to challenge everybody, softly challenge everybody here today to do one small piece of homework. And you can assign that homework to yourself. How are you going to make your performance space or your performance or your life in general more accessible to more people? And I say small piece of homework because the smaller the goal is, the faster that we can accomplish that and then roll that into the next goal. So for instance, my piece of homework is we have monthly meetings at the Warming House over Zoom to talk about the future of the Warming House. I want to make one of those meetings focused solely on accessibility and have a meeting like this and have it focused towards my venue. And then also I already have a goal to learn at least one word in ASL a day. Not that I remember them all, but I'm working very slowly. Yeah, Annie, parting words from Farm?
Sorry, am I unmuted? Sorry.
You're unmuted.
Passing back and forth. Once again, I just want to remind everyone that Marilyn Ray Beyer she's also emailed me now. So I'll put my email in the chat if anyone has any questions about vision. I don't know what to say, Amy. Visually impaired and blind folks.
Visually impaired is what the community uses for themselves.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. So, because we weren't able to address that, I think this time. I also want to say thank you to this amazing panel and thank you to Brianna for organizing this and a great job moderating. And I was completely inspired by this discussion. I will get everybody Amy's presentation in a PDF afterwards with all the links. But also upcoming with Farm, I just want to say that we weirdly confirmed that our next Tech Talk was going to be Hal Walker on TikTok right before we found out the big news and that our president is banning TikTok.
He is?
Pretty much effective. Like if you don't download the app by Sunday, you don't get it. And then by November sometime in November, it's going to be illegal unless somebody buys it. Now, who knows what this means? I've decided that we're going to go ahead with this tech talk on TikTok because I just think it's really fun to say anyway. And because I think Hal has a lot of interesting experience with this, and it's probably broader than that. But anyway, I wanted to share that. I think that's kind of funny, and just personally thank all you guys, Amy, for a great session today, and everybody else for coming. And if we're good, this is the moment where we ask you to hit gallery view and show yourselves if you want.
Everybody's just got their hands up.
I know. Hi, Mark. Nice to see you. Dogs. It's great. Thank you for joining us. Oh, and please join me in thanking Joe Gale for a wonderful job as our captioner. I am very excited, and I think we will be working with her again. Her information is also in the link or in the chat, and I will be sharing all of that information with all you guys in a follow-up email. So thanks so much for being with us. And everybody, wave. We ready to go, Brianna?
Ready to go. Thank you.
All right. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thanks for being here. Bye.